cannot, even when you're wanting to bring change, you cannot just give everything a go by. But having said that, that's a very big but. It is not Arvind Kejriwal or an Anna Hazare or a Ramdev that is engineering a certain mood. It is this mood and anger which is throwing up symbols like Kejriwal. So even if you have Ramdev go to Rishikesh, Anna Hazare go back to Raleigh Siddhi, you have Arvind Kejriwal suddenly taking that space. And I think it is this that political parties need to understand, you know, that things have gone just on and on and on, and people, urban middle class India has had enough.
Okay, but I'll take your reaction to 2 points very quickly. Come 2014, do you see corruption as the biggest electoral issue? And also, how do you respond to what Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw says, that we've heard enough of this Aam Aadmi, and to just assume that if you're not Aam Aadmi, you're corrupt and Aam Aadmi is the victim. Your response to that?
No, I think that to tar everybody with one brush, I think is less than fair, whether it's corporate India or, but you know, we all know this unholy nexus that we talked about, you objected to, whether political India corrupts corporate India or corporate India corrupts political India, you know, it's a vicious circle with officialdom part of it. You know, Bharat Singh Shekhawat, when he was alive, former vice president, used to say that till the early 90s, if a corporate person asked for an appointment with the Prime Minister or a senior minister, it would take them 3 to 4 months to get it.
Right.
Today they are on the advisory councils. Right. Whether it's the PM's council,
is it necessarily bad?
Well, that's good.
No, it may be good, but you know, if you are manipulating policy for individual gain, I'm not saying corporates per se are bad, because they're very much part of the, you know, there has to be that partnership. But if it is only corporate, political nexus existed even before independence. Right. But that was for national good. Today, if you are manipulating the system for individual gains, whether it's politicians doing it or industry doing it, then that is where the lack of faith of people comes up. And today that anger is
your quick response. I'll come to you in just a moment. Yeah.
I think, I don't object to the unholy, the use of the term unholy nexus. There are many of them, and we should find them and stop them, and there are lots of ways to do it. And frankly, one of the things I would suggest, and I disagree about hedging my bets for corporate India, absolutely not. Corporate India must be held accountable for corruption just like government is. Right. But in the meantime, I haven't seen government ease the processes, make approvals easier, cut down the red tape, take away so many of the elements that create corruption on one side. So what I'm saying is strengthen the institution, which is what you said. Go after the guilty. Really go after that, because then you'll prove your point. And I agree with your point about fair play. But by the way, if you don't have advisory councils with government and industry, you will not run a successful economy. It's very simple. Because you cannot run it just with government. You cannot run it. I agree with you. It shouldn't bias the government. But you know, frankly, most of the advisory council, I've sat on some, have enough bureaucrats, have enough politicians.
So there is a balance.
There's a balance. Right. We're not as if sitting there and crafting policy which goes here. There's a lot of discussion. Now, if I may, when policies are being crafted to benefit someone, they're not done in those councils. I can assure you, they're probably done through some other backdoor. Okay, it ain't happening in this public forum.
Right.
So, and I think it's important that we recognize in corporate India, and I will certainly stand up and say that we must be equally responsible. Having said that,
why aren't we getting enough noise about it is my question, because again, just like I said, that there is no political will to go ahead for stronger governance systems, there seems to be no corporate will either.
You know, I think it is too muted. I think we should stand up and say it louder. I agree with you on that, and I think we should show examples of doing it. For instance, you know, I was chairman of NASCOM, I've certainly been at CII.
Right.
We're trying very hard to say, well, if we find some corporate doing something wrong, what do we do about it? We throw them out, we take some action, we make a noise about them, we put their name up. Having said that, one last point please on this one.
Sure.
And it's not news. So if we stand up and talk about improving corporate governance, etc., and we do a lot,
Why not? Why not? Why it will make news in the current environment. Why will it not?
We would love to then get into the news in the current environment, and if that's what it takes, then that's sad, but that's where we are.
Corruption is making news, like it or not. Nalin, your point very quickly. Sanjay, I'll just come to you.
Yeah, I have a few points to make quickly. Number one is that if you would say, I'm sure Sanjay stands on the same thing, we could really slug it out just now on the corruption issue vis-a-vis our parties. I think probably Sanjay is doing the same thing what I am, respecting the nature of the show. We are not trying to make it a political slugfest. We're respecting the agreement. Second is, I would not, there are some valid points that Neerja ji has done. She's a very senior journalist, and I personally am very, very fond of her and respect her. But I think I would disagree from the other point that we are at the receiving end of this. I think we need to look at the big picture carefully, because we are today talking something important. The big picture is, it is a reality of India. 2014, whether we like it or not, these all issues will be there. But the risk that I want to point out is that if today any civil society is critical, as any other section of society, but if you are going to start making this as the central issue, please, does that mean if you do not make it to the political hustings and you don't get elected, does that mean India has rejected probity? So, let's be very careful. We are taking all these very black and white positions, but if you look at winnability of candidates, criminalization of politics is a reality. So is the matter of black money. These have been discussed. Electoral reform is needed.
Question to you, Nalin,
one second. Law and order is an issue. At the crux of it, it goes down to the law and order system. Now, if you have 13,000 judges instead of 77,000 judges, the legal system will be slow. If you're talking of corruption in the intake of police force and not remunerating them good enough too, you're talking of the basic agencies not working. So, these are big questions of India, and this is the idea of democracy, that the questions have to be raised. And we have to find the solutions. It's not just the politicians or just corporate India, it's each one of us has a role to play in it.
No, but Nalin, my question to you remains is that this is again a very different side of the opposition party now, simply because of some of the developments. What happened when the monsoon session was simply not allowed to function? At that time, for you, corruption was a very different issue.
It still remains. And
because we worry about the business of Parliament not being allowed.
And I'll take it into the political realm straight away. Nothing has changed in the stance that we have taken on corruption. Nothing has changed in...
Even if your party president is...
And yes, I will take it straight on my party president, and I will put it here right on the record. Mr. Gadkari has said it before the media on the record that if you can prove and business...
You seem to be...
Hold on. Yes, I'm coming to it, and then you can throw it to Sanjay too. Okay. Mr. Gadkari is on record, prove a business relationship with me and Mr. Sanchethi. I will quit politics. Hang on. You want to... No, hold on. Let's go one by one. This is just because if you're trying to say this, 2G is not our creation, and the Supreme Court's position is well known. Nor is Colgate. So you want to go into that political area, I'll debate this fully as much as you want, and I'll hold my ground.
But Nalin, I seem to disagree on the fact that when it comes to the BJP party president, there are different rules that should apply. But no, please read it first. Why not let that rule apply?
So now
wait, I'm going to actually let Sanjay take that on before playing the devil Sanjay, your point. I haven't gone to Sanjay in a long point. Nalin, I'll just come to you. Sanjay, go ahead, make your point.
Shweta, I would like to react to also what Kiran Mazumdar said a little earlier. I thought that was a bit of an elitist observation. If you ask me, it's very easy to blame the Aam Aadmi for his, small little petty things to get his work done. I think end of day, it's not the bottom of the pyramid that we need to blame. When you're looking at cleansing corruption, I think it's got to be right at the top. And it doesn't matter which government or which party. You got to address the problem at the very top. And that's where the source of the entire, I would call, the misdemeanors that happen really trigger off from. I always believe when people give examples of a constable, borrowing $10, I think it's almost harsh to the guy, because if you look at his monthly income, if you look at the fact that in Mumbai streets, he stands for 18 hours and on certain days, 48 hours in a day, you almost feel like condoning that act of a bribe. So I would not like to agree with Kiran's observation. I thought it was not really totally fair. Coming back to the point of this issue of corruption, there is absolutely no denying, and it's one of those unusual days where Nalin and I are probably we have had breakfast together at some point without our own knowledge. But end of day, corruption is an endemic systemic issue, and it's I call is somewhere a microcosm of the social values that are there in our society. And I look at it every day when I drive to work, and I look at any traffic island. No matter what the light is, everybody is honking to break a light. We are a shortcut nation. We have become a country where jugaad, which was once supposed to be a matter of pride or frugal engineering, has now become a shortcut abused term for saying how do you beat the system. And corruption becomes a function, it's a larger consequence of this mindset. So end of day, I think when we are approaching it, whether it's Nitin Gadkari today on IC's charge, you can see the flip side to that argument. As we made as a political party, I don't want to make this into a political slugfest, but as a Congress supporter, the point we made was that Arvind Kejriwal did not talk about some of the larger issues that he could have addressed, and not just about Nitin Gadkari, but perhaps even Narendra Modi. And as you discovered, there was Mr. YP Singh who came and talked about corruption in Lavasa Corporation. So, end of day, it should not become about competitive, downgrading of each other. The issue has to be sorted out. But I think the big question that you're raising today, Shweta, is the role of the corporate sector and the role of government. How do they need to work together? Clearly, the two need to coexist. But there's no denying the fact that today, and a lot of people know it, but they don't say it because it's not politically correct, but very often a politician is influenced to see where he can make money because of the way the bureaucrat, and there's nobody from the bureaucracy here. There's a bureaucrat who knows the policies and the procedures and the processes. And it's a bureaucrat and an industrialist who very often get hand in hand. And the politician actually very often is the third party. So, it's a larger issue. And I think in India, a setting up of a Lokpal won't solve it out. But bringing transparency and perhaps reducing a lot of bureaucracy in rules and regulations. The moment you cut down what I call is the whole labyrinth of processes, the moment you cut down decision making into fewer channels, I think you will be able to sort it out. And the Prime Minister's suggestion,
point taken, Sanjay, I have to get everybody to react to what you're saying, because I can already see Mr. Hasim and Nalin both wanting to react. And I have to also take a break, so very quick reaction.
Very quickly, I want to come down to specifically on Mr. Gadkari. Mr. Gadkari also has business interests. It's never been a secret. He has always said it. And on the case of Purti, I'm saying it on the record. It's not a company. 15,000 farmers are members of that. He owns shares worth a lakh of rupees, where their total assets are 10 crores. And I would refuse to take this, that, it's painting everyone with the same brush. Be careful of generalizations. We will fight every specific thing, and we say it on the record. If there's a case...
Your quick reaction also before I come to Mr. Bhasin on the BJP's stand.
Look, I think, the fact that there were families to whom the land belonged, and since it was excess land and was not being used for the dam, they wanted the land back, but instead it was given to Mr. Gadkari because of his proximity to Ajit Pawar.
I'll answer that after she finishes.
So, that itself, now you can call it propriety, you can call it sensitivity to the issues of farmers.
I want to also come on that for a simple reason. When the land compensation has been paid, it is taken by the government. The farmers have got the compensation. Now the land is the property of this.
I'm still talking big picture. I'm still talking big picture with multi-party corruption.
Cane sapling thing sold at 5.
So are you saying nobody in the BJP is corrupt and all of Congress is corrupt?
I'm answering specifically on the charge made on my president, and I'm saying it. If there is a corrupt person, certainly, and the BJP has a track record. If you will please go back in history, whenever we've been faced with a situation of that, the person hasn't been in power.
I actually disagree with these charges being talked about in this manner, quite honestly, because what happened 10 years ago, there were many nuances, many issues, many inferences in all the things that we're talking about, not just about Mr. Gadkari, but all the other events, which prevailed at that time. I can promise you that if somebody chooses to look into some of the transactions I've done with global customers, they can point to errors I've made, things that have gone wrong. So you can, 20/20 hindsight is the easiest thing in the world, and we indulge in it to a degree which has become a disease.
Also, is making profit now becoming almost a dirty word? Profit is a dirty word.
Anybody does anything, and it's suspect. Of course it's suspect. You made profit if you bought land from there. Let's at least understand all the facts before we decide. And I certainly would say, if I don't know enough facts, I hope more of us would say, we don't know enough to make a decision or form an opinion. I think that's one of the things I do pride myself on, is that I'm not going to form an opinion till I know a hell of a lot more that I need to know about whether it's right or wrong. Two, let me go forward on that. I just want to respond to the earlier comment about the Aam Aadmi. I don't think corporate India or Kiran was backing away or was giving them the blame. And I think the concept of bureaucrats and industrialists being in cahoots while the politician is a third party is, I'm sure, true sometimes, but broadly,
most often than not, it's not.
It's not true. I mean, who are we kidding? Let me tell you about the Aam Aadmi, and the only point we're making is we're not blaming him. I agree with the point on the policemen. They earn so little money that, frankly, and the conditions in which they work are really hard, really difficult. So I have more faith there than obviously if a big corporate leader does it. But the fact is, if you look at the number of fake resumes we get in our industry, 10-15% of resumes we get are fake.
So you're saying integrity is a larger issue?
Is a larger issue, and let's deal with it as a larger issue. Let's not say it's only at that level. Last point I would make, it's not just at the top. You have to do it at all levels. Saying it's just at the top, it has to start at the top, I don't think will solve the problem, because you really have to attack it at all levels, because it exists at all levels.
Okay, so can we really solve the problem, or is it something that will continue? That discussion coming up after a quick break. Welcome back. You're watching We Mean Business, and we're discussing the nexus between politicians and corporates. A very interesting discussion here. And Mr. Pramod Bhasin, I'd like to actually talk to you a little more about just the fact that politicians have business interests, or there are business people who are politicians as well. Is there any way of breaking it? The other thing also being political funding by corporate India. Is that something that's clearly never going to go away?
Politicians have business interests, and businessmen wanting to become politicians is good. I mean, frankly, if you look at other countries and you look across the world at many of the developed countries, that's how people get into politics. But isn't there a
conflict of interest there, an obvious one?
Not really, not really. I think the fact is that people misuse it, and when they misuse it, we should go after them.
How do you assume that it will not be misused is my question, because wouldn't there be an implicit assumption that there will be misuse of that power either way?
That's an implicit assumption in the politics and the despair that we are in. If you don't mistrust everyone, which is really what we've ended up doing, that anytime you have any kind of partnership of any kind, the first reaction is, who's abusing this? Who's doing the wrong thing? The fact is, you want to create employment in this country? I would like more businessmen, more private sector people, more people from other sectors coming into politics, and we would love, why not? Why shouldn't politicians have business? But having said that, political funding, we've talked about it at many forums in the past, of saying, let's start legitimizing it, let's start paying it by check.
And it seems to be happening. It seems to be happening already. Not fast enough. There are corporates who are declaring it now on their balance sheets, annual returns, that yes, this is the amount they've paid towards political funding, but that's already being questioned by minority shareholders.
And the problem is actually, but at least that dialogue is good. I really think that dialogue and that transparency. I think also when these things happen, like business turn politics, make it very open and transparent. Completely transparent. This is what I own, this is what I did, this is what I now want to do. Last point, if I may.
Sure.
The one point I would make is, as we think about political funding and some of these issues, making it all transparent will help us enormously. And I think if we can go down that path, it would be a huge issue. Simplify processes, make the courts work faster. The reason we don't get any conviction in all of these things is it takes so many years to get a case through court.
And punish the guilty. Nishaji, can we really see us moving in the direction that Mr. Bhasin is talking about here? Also the fact that while we keep talking about the politician, corporate India nexus, what about the issue that Mr. Kejriwal has raised about the politician nexus, in the sense that char kaam wo hamare karte hain, char kaam hum unke karte hain? That's a sad reality too, and that's something that clearly gets exposed in times like these.
Yes, that would, if that is true, that Mr. Gadkari has of course denied that he made that comment. But
and he also filed a suit and is expecting an answer in court from Mr. Damania on that one.
But if it applies to, say, other politicians, the upshot of that would be, hypothetically, if it was true, the upshot would be, the charge would be made against Mr. Gadkari when the ruling combined needed to be put on the mat, because you have financial interests at stake, you are not going to put them on the mat. So you are not going to be doing your work as the opposition party. That would be the damage part. The opposition is not in ineffective opposition. But coming
to the damage to the government also, a quick word from you on that, because again, talking 2014, how badly have the corruption allegations damaged the image of the two parties, and how big an issue is it going to be in 2014?
I think it's going to be a very big issue, corruption, and it's not just corruption, it is a linkage that people are making between corruption and rising prices and their economic hardships. They see here are scams with hundreds of thousands, these politicians making all this loot, and here are we have to go to the market every day, we have to pay more for milk, for vegetables, for wheat, for sugar, and gas now, which is going to be a big issue at election time. So that linkage is going to be a very damaging linkage.
And it will perhaps damage the UPA government.
It will, as you hear things, and you know, election results in Uttarakhand, by election of the chief minister, you know, his son cannot win it. Jangipur, the son of Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, scrapes through. And I think it's a national mahal that is also having a bearing on state elections.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. A few minutes ago, Mr. Pramod Bhasin was saying that, you know, I need a lot more before I'll put a charge on it. And Shweta, you're saying char kamia. This is based on a statement by the lady.
No, I'm not referring to the statement made by Mr. Gadkari, but the overall sentiment behind the statement.
Hold on. And I'm pointing out there's a court case against her. She has not replied. Second is, I find it really fascinating. If anyone in Maharashtra has been after the irrigation scam, it's been actually the BJP. I just don't understand if that is cooperation. What kind of cooperation is that?
Okay,
you know, I mean, honestly, if that's cooperation, this is fantastic. I mean, our leader of opposition, 10,000 documents to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, a PIL in court. I mean, this is absolutely fascinating.
Sanjay, the last word to you. We're clearly running out of time.
Okay, Shweta. You know, in my opinion, the biggest worry that I have with corruption is that it accentuates inequalities in India. I agree, corruption is an issue, it always will be an issue. But I think the biggest concern for any government, whether state or central, is the fact that in India today, it's not about rising prices alone. As Neil just said, inflation may go down at some point, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't become an issue. Corruption is a relevant point. But the biggest challenge that we have as a nation is the fact that you have produced 48 billionaires, but there are 49,000 slums in India. There are 600,000 villages which have roughly 70% of India living out there, and 250 million don't get more than $1 a day. That is where the biggest fear comes, because corruption distorts the distribution and the allocation of those resources. And I think therefore we need to challenge that. And it's important for both India Inc. and the government to realize that we both got to coexist, because as the Prime Minister has been reiterating, we need growth, but we also need equity. So reforms needs a human face, a human heart, and the sooner we recognize, the better for all of us.
Okay, Mr. Bhasin, are we ending this show on a pessimistic note, as pessimistic as Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw really was on systems not changing, the fact that corruption is not going to go away in a hurry, or are you optimistic that what's happening right now is going to lead to some sort of cleansing up of the system?
You know, I'm much more optimistic than that. I can understand where Kiran's coming from, and sometimes there are days when you despair enormously for our country. But I really am much more optimistic. One, I think we have to go through a cleansing. Corruption is too deep-rooted. We just need to have sanity around it. We need to make sure we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We don't go into witch hunts without all the facts before us so that we judge. But I hope politically we will go through a process of re-engineering, getting rid of approvals, reducing red tape, etc., because that is the breeding ground of corruption.
Even if it's going to happen at the cost of, like Mrs. Shaw was saying, policy paralysis, bureaucrats not taking decisions, even if it's happening at that cost, is corporate India okay with it?
They are not taking decisions for the wrong reason. I don't think there is any reason not to take decisions, but the fact is, if your institutions are really strong, you won't worry about it. If we move away from the politics of despair into really hope ahead and know and acknowledge, profit making is not bad. Partnerships between government and industry are required in our country, and the institutions, if they are strengthened, can really help us put this on an even keel so that we don't destroy everything just by a smear campaign that's happening.
Okay, I'm out of time. Nalin, very quick comment.
Absolutely. I think I have great hope. And the reason being two. One is, for every story of corruption that's hitting it, there are many stories of success, including at the political level, that are working. And second, and that's across the country.
Get highlighted.
That's a media issue. And the second point I want to say is,
I would disagree there, but
I think because good news doesn't make news.
Just report facts.
Ma'am, good news doesn't make news. Man bites dog is news. Dog bites man is no news.
Another discussion. I hope Reeta would back me on that one.
And my second point is that democracy, we have to understand.
Don't make every allegation such a big issue, and we will not report it too.
I want to just say that democracy is an evolutionary process. Because it's evolutionary, it's slow, it's painful, but it's a definite process.